Is it? Okay. Run VT.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to our weekly-ish GamesCast, coming to you from University of Huddersfield, or currently our home offices. So my name's Duke, and today we're all here. So we've got Daryl.
Hello.
We've got Mick.
Hi.
We've got Ash. And
Hello.
we've got Matt. Welcome back, Matt. This is his first return to stream, missing for a few weeks. So
Yeah, it should be fun.
yeah. So we're going to talk. Well, let's. Hang on. I have to start the slides first. Don't I? So let's jump over to the slides. And yes. Should we tell them what we're going to talk about this week, or should we just dive straight in to the what's on the box? Because that's kind of the important bit, isn't it?
What's on the box first? There's an overview slide coming up.
Cool. Okay. So let's hit what's on the box then.
We're obviously all here for what's on the box anyway, so
There is that. There is that. Absolutely. So we'll play Matt's wonderful video.
What? What you can say?
You tell me. The box, who's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box?
Yay. Somebody just said we can turn off ads. So clearly that's something we need to do in the old settings, I assume. Is that because we now recognise streamers, whatever the term is?
I'll have a look into it, but from what I can remember is Twitch actually sort of revoked it and I'm running them anyway, even if it's set to off.
Oh yes,
We'll have a look.
Scott says you can't turn ads off. So apologies for that. It's nothing we can do. Is it time to leave Twitch, or go somewhere else? Everybody's face like leave Twitch.
Where do they put the ads? I don't really understand where they put them.
it's pre-roll when you first join. You have to watch an ad before you can watch.
I see.
It's all on YouTube after anyway. If
It is
you
on
do need
YouTube.
a refresher.
So as a refresher, talking of segueing in here, what's on the box for those who don't know? We are, because there are 5 of us actually, we got 5 this week. So we're going to read out our what's on the box. Only one of us knows the answer, as it were, because we made them. And then it's up to the rest of the team and you guys in chat to guess the game. So it's simple as that. Let's dive straight in. So who's up first? Me. So mine is, I don't think there's a physical box for this. So it's the most modern game I've ever done. So the text is, this game is a stylized experience inspired by the golden era. That's not even a word. Era of something.
Not another racing game. Jeez.
From the creator, absolutely. Anyway, race across the world through colourful and stylized environments in top-down view, which is actually the hardest part of the game. Will you master the game?
This is I know
30 seconds. 30 seconds. There we go. 30-second time.
Weren't you playing this?
This
the
is
other
the
day
one.
on
This is the new racing game that you bought the other day, and you love it.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
like
Drift
racing,
or something.
drift or world. I can't
Chris
remember what it's called.
Chris has got it in the chat.
Yeah, that's it. Chris has got it straight away. Arthur Rally.
I thought we weren't supposed to look at the chat.
I know,
Right,
but I
yeah,
couldn't remember.
yeah.
I knew what it was. I just couldn't remember the name, so I was looking for the name.
Yeah. They've got it. And timer's up anyway. It is The Art of Rally. It was on Epic for quite a good deal the other day, so I bought it. It's really, it's not perfect. The driving's a bit weird, but it's a lot of fun though. I'm enjoying it. Very, very stylized. And none of the cars are called their real names. Like the Mini's called the Mini. But anyway, onwards. Matt, you ready? 3, 2, 1.
So this one, name of game, start with. So we've got it blanked out. So name of game puts you in control of a failed alchemic experiment, trying to figure out what's happening on a sprawling, ever-changing, and seemingly cursed island. Tough but fair combat, responsive controls, challenging foes, permadeath, and of course the emergency panic roll to get you out of trouble. Make for a demanding, visceral, and cathartic action game.
This has to be like Dead Souls or something. What is it? Dark Souls, Demon Souls. That's it.
Demon Souls.
That's what I'm guessing.
There's quite a lot of clues in there, actually. The more you read it, the more clues there are.
I've got a horrible feeling I've never even heard of the game. I don't
I'm with
remember
Ash
that
on
at
this
all.
one, I think.
Yeah. See, I've played Dark Souls and there's no alchemy there, I don't think. So I've never played Demon Souls.
So there's some clues in there, like the word ever changing and
permadeath.
permadeath.
So it's obviously a rogue light or like. Yeah.
Can't think of anything.
Rogue Legacy.
Shall we find out?
They have got it in the chat, by the way. I've seen it
Have
pop
they?
up a few times. Yeah.
Okay, you ready? The answer is Dead Cells.
Nope.
Dead
I have
Cells.
literally never heard of it.
Not played it.
Yeah, I got
Have you not
that.
played it?
Yeah.
It's a really good like side-scrolling combat roguelike where you start. The only thing that goes through every play is your unlocked weapons and upgrades, so you can then get further and further into the game, fight bigger and bigger and harder bosses. Really good game, and whoever the developers of it, they keep releasing updates, like ridiculous amount of updates to it.
It's got
They
really
keep doing
for characters and that as well.
Yeah, like it has this sort of like pixel art aesthetic, but actually it's all 3D but rendered down to pixel art. So it's a really cool way of doing it.
Their dev diaries are really cool too. It's all about feeling right, and they really nail it. I've never played it, but just by judging on their sort of dev vlogs.
As Gary says in the chat, it's really hard. But as you progress through, the earlier stages become easy and the later stages get hard again. So it's a really good balance of that continual progression, even though it's a roguelike and you just play over and over again.
Is it only on Switch?
No, it's on everything. It's on
No.
PC, Switch, PlayStation. I just have it on the Switch, that's all.
Yeah. I should add it to the list. Mick, you're up next.
Okay.
So there's your text.
Chocks Away. Missing word. It's a strategic simulation game where picking the right crew and keeping your bomber in tip-top shape can mean the difference between completing your mission or losing it all.
Bomber,
It's gotta be a really old
Bomber
one.
Man?
No, it's not Bomberman.
No,
It's to do with planes.
It's obviously planes, but
this has got to be from the late 90s, early 2000s. One of the I seem to remember playing a lot of games back then that were like this, where you got to like employ, you got like little cards and you'd employ people.
Or is it
a super modern version of?
There's a Snoopy game where you fly a plane. Snoopy the Red Baron. That's incredible. Possibly that.
I'll give you a clue. It is quite new. I mean,
hang on a second. I just counted the stars, and it spells bomber crew, doesn't it?
Oh, you actually put the right number of stars.
who does that?
and the actual words are in the actual text as well.
Yeah. I just read. Yeah, you can see it from the start. I did the right number of stars on mine actually as well.
I need to Google what Bomber Crew is. I've never heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I've not played it. Is it any good?
Yeah, it's a really good kind of like pseudo simulation kind of thing, but it's done in a really low poly, kind of like almost pixel textured style.
Yeah.
But you control the crew in your bomber and tell them to move into different positions and that as you do in the mission. And that.
I'm sure I played that exact game back in the 90s.
So you have to move the crew around the bomber craft and like. So is it a little bit like Faster Than Light, but more action?
Yeah, well, actually, they've just released their new game, which is called Space Crew.
Okay.
And so you're in like a spaceship, and it's like moving you guys around in spaceship and everything, and then.
It's a 3D version of FTL, basically.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. Oh yeah, actually, I've just done a YouTube video of Space Crew, and it looks very similar to FTL.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Bomber Crew, really good, really, really enjoyable. Yeah.
It's on Steam. 15 quid for Bomber Crew. Might try that anyway. We didn't actually load the box, did we?
Oh, there you go. Bomber Crew Complete Edition. Oh, it's on Switch as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I
right.
think it's on most consoles and PC and that. Yeah.
Ash, you've not done your text comes up straight away, so
yeah,
you have to dive straight in.
Again. But So just a clue before we do this one is this is the very first game I ever remember. I had a big sort of all-in-one PC, and this was on a little floppy disk.
Minecraft. You're that young, right?
No, so the fiendish doctor maybe is back. His bombs are ticking in the North Pole factories. No human crime fighter has been able to defeat him. So Fish, finned investigators of shady humans, has designed a special robo-suit.
I know what this is.
Oh, is this
James Pond?
Robocod.
Yeah, James Pond. I remember.
Yeah.
Is it James Pond?
I'm not very good at these, am I?
It's James
Oh,
Pond
I
messed it up last
Robocod.
week.
Yeah, James Pond was awesome.
And you've just straight away. I thought it'd be really tough.
That's all right. You're going to get mine as well. Mine's totally obvious.
Should we ever see the image? Oh, your image doesn't work, Ash. Your image doesn't work. Oh, it
It
does.
should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. James Pond. What did the chat?
Yeah, that was good. That I remember that.
Oh, the chat got it as well. Just, I think before we dived on.
I think actually it's probably only good in my memory. If we went back and played it, it's probably awful.
I remember being on the roof and there's loads of items and you had to jump on them in a certain way to get like 99 lives. Sort of figuring that out without using the internet back then.
Talking of replaying old games, do you remember when? I can't remember who it is. Whoever does Battlefield games, they did Battlefield 1942 for free. Origin, I guess, wasn't it? Or yeah, on Origin. I mean, and they did, and I went back and played 1942 again, and it's like, oh wow, there's no foliage. It's like 5 trees on the entire island, but at the time it was really immersive. Not 1942, Battlefield 1942.
Yeah,
First
Battlefield 1942.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, it's basically just a barren landscape, isn't it? If I remember
it is, but you kind of forget that, like how many trees there are now. You kind of assume that there were always that many trees in your memory. I mean,
The one that got me like that was Magic Carpet on the PlayStation. It was a great game to play, but when it felt really amazing to play it because you felt like you were, flying a magic carpet. But you go back and actually look at the YouTube clips of it, and it's awful, truly awful.
I would say anything on the Atari VCS apart from Space Invaders.
You can't tell what anything is. Even
Anyway.
Space Invaders is bad.
Next, Daryl, you're up.
Well, I seem to have done my slides correctly. Experience an unforgettable journey in a landscape forgotten by time, a seamless world filled with miles of majestic terrain, a story of companionship and undying love of mythical giants to discover, unearth, and destroy. 3, 2, 1. I'm astonished. Really?
Is it? It's not the giant. What do you call them? Those massive things that you have to fight. Colossus. The Colossus one. Yeah.
I told you get it instantly. And
is that what Shadow of the
I
Colossus?
I had four attempts at getting this today. I just couldn't think of anything that had a
yeah, that one. I got there in the end. Giant things you have to kill. Well, I was close. Thanks to Ash there for naming it.
Really good remake on the PS4.
Yeah.
Is it just a re-release with IDF graphics?
No. It's Bluepoint did the remake, so all new textures, all new models, but look like just HD versions of the originals.
And then I think is it? Oh, that's we all done. Yeah, we all done.
That's all 5. That's what's on the box done.
Wow. So finally to the actual point of the session. So we've got three main things to talk about. One is it's Guidance Week next week. So for the first years in particular, this will be the first time you've come across Guidance Week. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we wanted to do a bit on failure, and we're not suggesting that we are failing you, but it will make sense when we talk about that.
We're suggesting it's not an option.
Yeah, and then a bit about managing time, and particularly, I think some students will benefit from this quite a lot in terms of working on things at the same time rather than one after another. So we'll dive straight in. I did the Guidance Week once. I suppose I can talk about that a little bit. So there is in each semester there is a Guidance Week. It's sometimes called Reading Week. It's sometimes called Study Review Week. But the point is, it's a week without teaching or formal teaching. So I'm running some support sessions. Is anybody else running anything next week?
I'm running things for Advanced 3D because it's really the final week it's running.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was planning on doing some support sessions.
Okay, so it's mostly support and catch, things like that, rather than formal scheduled teaching. But other than that, so it's a week without teaching, really. So it's used for some administrative stuff for us, for the university, but also for you guys. Really, it's a chance to catch up. So I know my module has suffered a little bit, as other modules have had assignments due, and we'll talk about that more later. It's a chance to revisit any of the content, so go back to early weeks, week 3, week 2, week 1, where all the weeks we've done, and reinforce that knowledge. So if you skipped over something or you're uncertain of something, grab some one-to-one time with us when we're free and revisit that content, catch up, make sure that you're not drifting too far behind, if at all. Also, for each of us, we should be messaging you or you messaging us if you require a personal academic tutor meeting. So you already know who your Pat is. If not, let us know. We'll tell you who it is. And just have a catch up. Make sure everything's on track. Make sure there's no extra support required or anything that Pats are for, really. Just having a chat and catching up. Make sure everything's on track for a successful first year. And then I'll just put a little note at the bottom because CourseCom. So you've already got a message about student panels being this Friday for first, second, and final years. So first year's at 10, second year's 11, final year's 12. You'll have Teams links for those invites. For the reps, except in final year where everyone's invited. Please talk to your reps if you have any feedback for us. And then we meet next week with the reps, and we all have a big chat about how the course is going and changes that are coming or things that you've mentioned in the panel and stuff like that. It's very much listening to you guys and responding. Is why we have CourseCom. Would anybody else like to add anything about Guidance Week?
I think just that student panel, I know that it's kind of not tied in directly with Guidance Week, it's just that was when we do course committee. Student panel is really important as it allows us to get a better feeling of how the student experience is going, what's happening, and then it allows us to see whether we need to think about making changes going forward and stuff like that. So especially for the final years, I know that I've sent out a link for the final years, but as many of you that can join that on Friday as possible, that'd be really good to get, because we've obviously got some big changes this year for final years, so getting feedback on how that's gone will be really vital.
Can I just add beyond that it's really useful to get your feedback collectively, and where there's a consensus, it can actually lead to real change. One of the things that you probably may not realize at all is that in some circumstances, we as a lecturing and teaching team have very little power to make changes that go beyond our teaching. So a good example of this was that students kept talking about the fact that they couldn't get access to decent hardware in the library. Finding access to labs outside of hours was difficult. And that was raised several times in course committee, but because it kept repeatedly being raised, it led to us having the drop-in lab where you can go that's not timetabled. So it can, and that's quite it's an expensive thing, but the course committee can lead to incredibly positive things like that. If you have suggestions as to how things can improve, I know this year is particularly weird, but obviously, the second years will be here for another 2 years probably, and the first years will be here for as many years as they need. And there are things that can happen via that meeting that can be very useful.
Cool. I've just noticed on our Streamcast, I don't know if you did next to live, it says excellent. Is that button suggesting the quality of our content is excellent, or the stream quality is excellent? I don't know if you guys can see that.
No, I guess it's just the quality.
Yes.
No, I think it's judging what we're talking. What's on the box?
Your new internet.
Yeah. So moving on then from Guidance Week, this was I think Ash, was this your idea to talk about failure? I think
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
So apologies in advance. I'm currently under the weather, so someone might have to take over if I start having a coughing fit. But what's interesting is just teaching the barrel stuff for our students. Now, this assignment's only worth 10%, and a lot of them are saying, I'm a failure, it's not very good. And, the reason is that they're not understanding progression. They're not comparing themselves to the right things. A good example is one of the sort of synchronous sessions I did last week. A student said, I've done this barrel 6 times. I'm fed up. So I was like, okay, let's have a look. And it looked like a barrel, like the topology was nice. I was like, I'm curious though, let's have a look at your first one if you've done it 6 times. And the first one was, just almost like a flat side with tapered in at the top. So to me, that's success. If you compare your work to your previous work, he's done it 6 times, he's improved. That's not failure. If you compare it with yourself and look at how far you've come, I think that's a good way of sort of seeing success. And we'll get into that a bit more later. But I just want to sort of talk about what failure is and sort of how to understand it better.
Isn't there a quote, which I'm going to butcher now, but it's something about the only way to learn is to fail? Something like that. I can't remember the exact quote. But
I do think it is a mindset of our... I've seen it over the last several years, is that students are less inclined to accept failure than they used to be.
If at first you don't succeed, quit.
Well, to a certain extent, that's sort of the mindset now. A little bit is that they don't want to fail at all, so they don't attempt. So it's kind of the mindset: if I don't attempt it, I won't fail, so I won't be a failure. But you don't become successful unless you fail a few times in that process.
Absolutely.
And that happens in class as well, is that they won't share work because they feel embarrassed. Yet as soon as the class is over, you get bombarded with lots of individual messages. So it's kind of hard to sort of give everyone individual feedback. And that's because, again, they compare themselves to everybody else who's probably, they've got more experience or put sort of more hours in. But if you compare it to, a good example is people have come in here from college knowing 3D. And some people have come in here not knowing it at all, and they sort of feel discouraged. But when you look at the effort they're putting in, and if you compare it to past work, that is progression. Yeah.
So a really interesting comment in the chat. It says, when you're paying £9,000 a year, you kind of don't have the legroom to fail without ending up in a mounting of student debt. Now, my response to that is, what do you think first year is for? What do you think the definition of first year is? Because for me, it is let's experiment and let's fail so that we can become better. I was going to
say, just to add some clarity there, and somebody who's mentioned it in the chat, we're not suggesting failing a module. We're suggesting, and not failing an assignment. What we mean is failing on a day-to-day or week basis that then you build upon. So we're not at any point suggesting that you should fail an assignment or a module in order to improve. We're talking about those small improvements.
I think that whole thing of referring to it as failure, I think, I've always referred to this as making mistakes. I think we all, to err is human and all that. Defining it as failure seems permanent, whereas a mistake feels like it can be rectified.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah,
but that's what I mean. The students are thinking they're failure, when in fact they're not. Looking like this is why the barrel's 10%. It's because you can learn from those mistakes. You can highlight those areas you need to improve.
That's a good clarification, Duke. There is that not to fail the whole year, is to fail within a module, is to learn and make mistakes within a module so you can learn from them. And this is one thing that actually Ash was just saying, is that students don't want to show you their work until it's finished, and it's the best it possibly can be. And you're just like, well, it's never going to be the best it can possibly be unless you show it and you get feedback on it. So
I mean, you are looking, you look at this teaching team, and there's well over 100 years of experience between us.
Just in Darryl
alone.
Just in Darryl alone. It's sarcastic.
It's not even that as well. Students shouldn't be afraid to show it and for other students to look at it as well. Because quite often another student might actually come up with an idea or a suggestion that we've not even thought of. So by showing it amongst the peers, you've got that wider amount of brains looking at it, kind of thing, on that.
Yeah, we got some good comments in the chat as well, Chris, and I think it's Migle, isn't it? Ignomist Migle, maybe, but two students there saying about how they the first Chris saying failed and used it as a motivator. Migle looking back, and the most satisfying feeling of all is that sense of improvement. And Gary's chipping in as well. So lots of
Yeah,
people chipping in. So I think
he's the world expert at this.
yes, yeah. So I think so. Those for the first years, listen to second and placement students and Gary, who's a grad. Don't just take it from us as academics. There are actually there are real people.
But
not that we aren't.
We've all been there. Probably every day of our lives. I mean, I tried making some sound insulation just yesterday, and when I got up this morning, it's still completely fallen apart. So I ended up on YouTube trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. But whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's 3D or whether it's some just DIY project that you're on with, you've got to make mistakes. You are ultimately going to learn from those mistakes. You'll go, oh, what did I do wrong there? You go off, you do a tiny bit of research, and you improve. And those little life lessons build incrementally until you get brilliant at what you do.
Should we throw in the two cliches of practice makes perfect and trial and improvement?
Totally true, though, isn't it?
They've both been around for longer than we have. So let's move on a slide to comparison. Comparing yourself to the best.
This one's always a really interesting one because Artstation is the go-to now, but for years you had places like ZBrush Central, you had CG Persia, Artstation, you had CG Society, all these other communities online which had the best of the best artists.
DeviantArt.
Maybe not quite, but it's quite interesting. I did the same when I was learning how to do this. I went on CG Society a lot and looked at it and was just like, this is just ridiculous. How is anyone supposed to get to this standard? But that's the point, is that you're supposed to be using it as a goal, as a target, not as a direct comparison to yourself. And Artstation is the now go-to, but we see so many students that just look at Artstation and then get sort of knocked down a peg, and they think, oh well, I'm not good enough because my work's never going to be there on that trending page of work.
I think it's a fine balance, isn't it? Like, you can look at a piece of art and be really inspired and fired up, and then if you are directly comparing yourself to that, then you sort of lose motivation, you lose self-esteem. I think, Duke, if you actually want to jump to the next slide.
Before we do, just a couple of comments that are handy. Going back to one side, Kiara's saying, pushing yourself, practice only makes you improve if you do it right and constantly push yourself. So yeah, always having, as you just said then, Ash, something to aspire to, some inspirational piece that you want to achieve. And Gary felt the need to shout, comparison is useless to your growth. So he's definitely agreeing. So anyway, Ash, we'll move on to your next one.
Just what Matt said is that they should be seen as a goal, but you have to be in the understanding that whoever has made that piece of art has probably put in a lot more hours, especially if, I'm talking to you as a student now who's only just started. You can't compare yourself to them because it's just going to lead to unhappiness, low self-esteem. Now, a good sort of self-esteem boost is just to compare your sort of best work to somebody who's put in less hours than you, sort of see where you are on that sort of scale. And in fact, it goes back to the early slide. The best thing you can do is look at your previous work. Take your current best work, look at your previous work, and see how much you've grown. And you sort of get that passion and that desire back to start getting back into it.
I don't do modeling and texturing, but as my hobby of photography, if I look back to the images I took 20 years ago, I wouldn't show them to anyone. They were I thought they were good at the time, but I delete half of them now because you're like, oh, that was terrible. And I imagine it's very much the same in modeling and texturing.
It's the same for any artist. Even like one of the most prominent and vocal character artists right now online is Raf Grassetti, who is the lead character artist at Sony Santa Monica, making like the God of War games. And he has a really prominent Instagram and YouTube channel right now. You've probably seen his work if you've been on any type of Artstation or any type of gaming site. And he has a really good podcast that he puts together every now and again with different artists. And it's amazing how that people compare themselves to him and say, how is he so good? Well, the answer is he's put hundreds of thousands of hours of practice in. That is the answer. But then he also says in his podcast that he has people trying to knock him down all the time, saying he's rubbish and his work's useless and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I've made 6 characters this week. How many characters have you made? It's this never-ending cycle of, it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're just starting out in this field or whether you are literally at the top of your game. I don't think he could get any higher in terms of where he wants to go, and yet he still sees himself as needing to improve and needing to practice and needing to put in that extra work, because again, people are comparing themselves to him and he's comparing himself to others. So it's not just for new students that are comparing themselves.
Yeah, and people like that are very single-minded. I mean, he's a very good example of someone that concentrates on really one particular skill set and one particular way of doing that, and rinses and repeats, and is trying to perfect that as an art. It's much more difficult if you're split in multiple directions. I mean, if you're a first-year student, you are doing 6 modules simultaneously, and they're all stretching you in different directions. You may have a part-time job. There might be all sorts of things in your personal life that are stretching you as well. And current conditions that we're working under, obviously, adding to people sort of stress about completing work, and we do understand that. So, but Matt's absolutely right. It doesn't happen in a matter of hours or tens of hours or hundreds or even thousands of hours. It literally has to be, tens of thousands of hours of investment before you are at a point where you can say that you are one of the best in the world at a particular thing. And if I've always worked as kind of a generalist. I couldn't say that I'm the best in anything, like even in the best category, really anything. If there's one thing I'm good at, it's probably sort of like creature design. But if I sort of totaled up the hours that I've put into that over the past 25, 30 years, it's not going to approach 10,000 hours. I'd be lucky if it approached 5,000 hours. And a lot of that time is just teaching, frankly. So it is a long-term commitment for anybody that's going down this route. You can't expect it to happen overnight. And it's exactly the conversation I've been having with my final years. What you've got to do is get to the point where you look like a solid graduate, and then your career starts. And it's the stuff you do in your career that's going to make you, not the stuff you do at university.
And it's a good point, that 10,000 hours, and putting all that time into something, you have to be passionate about it. So going back again to that social comparison, if you're not comparing yourself to yourself and seeing how you've improved, but you're comparing yourself to Artstation, you're going to lose that passion. You're going to lose that motivation. So keep trying to get that fired up.
Yeah.
There's an interesting...
There is...
Go on, Matt. I was going to say, I've just quickly Googled the 10,000 hours, because it potters around all the time, doesn't it? That 10,000 hours of practice makes you an expert. And the second link on Google is The Great Practice Myth, Debunking the 10,000 Hour Rule. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't clicked on the link, but I wonder where
it's a
rabbit hole goes.
It's a total rule of thumb, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we talk about it, we are just using shorthand for practice makes perfect, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
And there is a comment that says, more importantly, do what you enjoy. So I think that is the key important thing. You're going to have to put in 10,000 plus hours to become expert in something. But if you don't enjoy it, what's the point?
And that also links to Duke saying his old photos feels they're rubbish now, but at the time they were good. And that's probably because, he was trying new things. Probably, I'm guessing, Duke, he felt they were a success because you'd done new things and it'd come out quite well and you were passionate about it. But now, because you've grown so much and you look back at it, you can see that improvement.
It's also because I didn't know everything. I mean, I still don't know everything. But what I mean is I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't know things about depth of field that allowed me to shoot animals in a zoo, for example. So all my early animals in zoos have the mesh, the grill, whatever, in front of it, the fence to stop me being eaten by the tiger. But, if I went now, I would know how to get rid of that. That fence using depth of field. So it's also the skills that you learn to overcome the problems that you don't yet know how to do, and through that practice, through that learning, you learn better methodologies, shortcuts when you get really strong. So it's constantly learning, isn't it?
I'd add to that. There's some things that you just slowly sort of absorb that you need to do, but that some lessons are much more difficult to actually learn than others. One of the things that I obviously teach is character arts, and I started sculpting when I was in my teens, and I've known all along I've known that, you know, all good artists think about the bone structure and then think about the muscles and the tendons and then the skin and the fat and then the aging of that, and that's how you are supposed to think about a sculpture. I've got to admit, frankly and quite clearly, that I didn't learn that in the first 10 years that I was sculpting. It is only now when I'm looking at students' work and critiquing it that I'm really doing that process internally. My brain is working through those problems, and I'm trying to get the students to engage with that. But fundamentally, I know that it took me a very, very long time to internalize that and to think in that way. And I can't expect my students to think in those terms overnight. You have to do it gradually, and you have to kind of be almost pushed to think in those terms, and it is very much a thought process rather than an internal process that happens in the background subconsciously when you're first learning this stuff, and that will go on for years and years and years, and eventually you'll have a really good grasp of understanding of anatomy and the way that all these systems work, and you'll be able to sort of compare and contrast. But again, it comes from a tremendous amount of research, looking, learning, and from my perspective, you know, teaching is an exceptional way of doing it because I'm seeing, you know, hundreds of projects simultaneously and breaking down those problems. But yeah, you can never expect to learn anything overnight.
Well, that's why you're a teacher. All
There's
that experience.
A couple of really interesting comments. No, sorry, a couple of really interesting comments come past in the text chat. One of them I particularly like, that practice makes permanent rather than practice makes perfect. I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at it. And yeah, we can't all be perfect. And what we make, not every version will be perfect. So permanent, yeah. Quite like
Somebody's written in the chat about sort of learning to ride a bike. When you concentrate on trying to ride a bike, you can't do it. It's only when it becomes second nature, when it's kind of instinctual, that actually you can just do that, and actually you can completely do it without thinking.
I think actually,
all of this is the same thing.
It kind of ties into one of the discussions we were having on the Discord a couple of days ago, and Gary was part of that discussion. We were talking about the importance of referencing, and it was trying to get across to the first years that referencing doesn't mean you copy directly what you see. Reference is there so that you can build a framework to work from on your own pieces of work, so you get the basics right. So as you were saying about when you're doing character work, you have to get the anatomy right, you have to get the skeleton, the muscle structure, etc. At the beginning, when you're learning, you need to look at that closely. You have to have an anatomical figure in front of you, you have to have books open to make sure you're getting it. But as time goes on, you start to know it inside out, where the muscles go, where this should be, and you can rely a little bit less on that reference. But I'm sure when you're sculpting, you still just every now and again just go, oh, let me just go back, look at this anatomy book again. I just need to make sure.
Look, I mean, I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and I use Pure Ref now extensively. I will always, when I'm sculpting something, have absolutely every little physical piece of the anatomy laid out so I can understand exactly what I'm trying to sculpt. And I usually try, if it's a human in particular, I will try and find somebody that looks like the character that I'm trying to sculpt, so I can borrow from nature directly, even down to sort of like pores and wrinkles and things of that nature, because making it up gets you absolutely nowhere. Let me. I mean, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but it's important that we get sort of like this across. We know we've got first and second years watching, but they may think, oh, by final year I'll be completely fine. But literally, my final year students, and we've had this conversation repeatedly over the last few weeks, I more or less insist that my final years go off and find concept art and work directly from someone else's concept art, because we don't train you to be concept artists. So the idea that you by final year, by some sort of osmotic process, have become a concept artist miraculously is not going to happen. So stand on the shoulders of giants, learn what things should look like from other people that have been doing concept art for many, many years. Ask if you can use their concepts and develop your 3D work based upon something much cooler and much cleverer than anything you could possibly have created yourself.
Yeah, there's a really good talk by concept artist Feng Zhu on YouTube, and he does an entire section based on visual library, and that's what he refers to it as, is that he's a concept artist that's been doing it for years and years and years, and he says his visual library is quite large now, is because he's been to many countries, he's visited lots of places, he's read lots of books, he's done all these different things. And he says concept artists, when they're first coming up, and artists in general, their visual library is tiny.
Oh, absolutely, totally. I mean, it's
They've
that whole
done
thing. Go on, carry on.
they've done very little in their lives so far. So their visual library consists of the movies they've watched and the games they've played, and that's about it. But as you get more and more developed, that visual library becomes bigger, and you can start exploring more bigger and more adventurous things than you ever thought you could do before.
It is a total truism. It's like that travel broadens the mind thing as well, isn't it? But we've maintained for years that the students, I mean, this cuts across art. That comment cuts right into design. If you broadly read, if you don't just play the same types of video games and watch the same types of TV and movies, and you actually, read more extensively, actually read proper books, and you go off and you watch sort of a much more diverse range of film, or you take in the occasional play, or you travel, if you've got the ability to do that, and you can travel the world in Google Earth to some degree nowadays, and you can see all sorts of amazing places. But that all of that does broaden your horizons, and play if you're a gamer and you're playing the same sort of, if all you do is play racing games and RTS games, then you're Duke. But
It's not all.
you should be.
It's just what I mostly play.
I know, but you really should broaden your horizons and play a really wide range of games, and have a really good grounding in lots and lots of different types of game mechanics, because everything that you play will influence what you come to design in the future.
It's your fault I play RPGs.
That's why it slipped out.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were doing with the first years. We did in the very first week for this lot of first years. We did a little activity where we got them to play an old game on like the SNES or the Mega Drive or whatever it might be, and a lot of the feedback was just this is a rubbish game, and we were like, but analyze it. You need to not just compare yourself to the games that you play and you like, but compare and contrast games that other people like, games from history, games that have been really popular in the past. Why were they popular? What was that drive that got it to that stage? And that's how you become a good game developer, is by having a big visual library of information to draw from, and then we'll tie it all the way back to failure, is practice and learn from your mistakes as you.
There are quick
develop
ways to
new
do
things.
that. I mean, one of the things that we talk about in Concept Dev 1 is that whole idea that a video game invariably is a sealed black box. You can't see what's going on. You can't see the rule sets. You can't tell what's making it tick. And it's why we encourage students to, play a really wide range of board games, and decide on house rules. Play around with variations on the rules. Go onto Board Game Geek and see what other people are suggesting is possible with variations in rules for that particular game. Learn, just mess around with some of the sort of variables in there. Add counters, take away counters, just change those sorts of things. See what happens. These things have been play tested to death before they hit the market. And yet, even then, with games that, like Ticket to Ride's a good example of this that most people are aware of. You take a basic rule set and you can keep sort of like riffing on that for forever. There's so much that you can do, and we were talking about this earlier. We start playing D&D again for the first time in forever, and we're playing the 5th edition rules, and they're dramatically different to the rules that I played previously. But again, that's an open system. You can see what's going on when you're rolling dice and you're sort of checking against tables. Those tables have been weighted and balanced to make that game more playable. Figure out how that works, because all that stuff underpins all the games you play on, as far as video games are concerned. You simply don't get to see it. You've kind of got to figure that out for yourself when you're creating your games from scratch. And that's where modding comes in as well. Actually, there are certain video games that you can play and expose the variables, and that's always a very wise thing to start doing early on.
Let's move along a little bit.
That brings us nicely back to sort of just experimentation and practice. So that's how you build, as you experiment with these numbers in the game dev. So if we go back to the slides, I think the next slide is
just a bit of a summary.
That idea. Oh, so it's the next one I was thinking of.
Yeah, just a quick. Well, luckily you brought us back to failure, Matt, and then Daryl wandered off again. So we'll quickly do these. I was about to say that nicely brings us back to Daryl. So, Ash, I think you wrote this one, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So to me, just failure is sort of knowing where your sort of skills are lacking, and then just not applying yourself and just being lazy and, as we said before, directly comparing yourself to someone better. That's to me is failure, and then being hard on yourself. So yes, it's good to be hard on yourself. You can see that that's in both categories. But if life has done something which isn't your fault and it's getting in the way, you sort of need to take a step back and don't see it as a failure, but how you're going to sort of work around it. But the main thing for me is just the lacking of not applying yourself and being lazy. And I'm not saying it's our students, but the thing that resonated with me as a student was, wait a minute, I've spent 14 years in education, getting GCSEs, going through college, trying to get into university. I'm not going to waste this last 3 years of freedom. I wasn't a carer. I didn't have any life responsibilities. This was the only time I had left to make the most of building myself and then getting on to having sort of a dream job. So, really made the most of it and started applying myself once I realized that sort of thing. So to me, yeah, that is failure, just not applying yourself. But anyway, it's just a summary of what we've been talking about. So far.
And then we'll swing all the way back that pendulum to Matt for this slide. Oh, no, it's not yours, was
Yeah,
it?
no,
So this is a quite interesting couple of slides, because what we wanted to show you is where everybody starts. Everybody starts at the same place of wanting to do something, wanting to create something, but you don't know how, and so you have to start somewhere. And this little slide here is one member of staff's first bit of 3D that they ever created. Ash put his hand up there. We're going to see if they could guess who it was, but
sorry.
This is Ash's first bit of 3D. So do you want to just talk about why you created this weird looking penguin and whatever the thing in the bottom left is?
Excuse me.
Is that a mouse? It looks like a squash mouse.
It's a hover car.
platypus.
So I had.
It's
A
not a
hover car.
platypus then.
It's a hover car and a penguin. Thank you. And I think it's quite obvious. But
You've got one fan
Yeah,
in the
you know-
chat.
Is
Yeah,
it
Kiara
related
loves the
to Perry
penguin.
the platypus though?
no, it's a penguin. It looks nothing like a platypus.
No, it's hamster.
You can see just a couple of iterations where I built the base shape without using reference and realized, wait, this isn't working. Let's go back. I didn't know what smoothing groups were, so sort of looked into that. And then I think you see on the video is, just like Matt said, it's a case of starting and learning new things and applying them. So started rigging it. It taps his foot. Yeah, it's not great, but it's a start. Yes, it's not very good, but at the time, almost like Duke's photos, I'd never done 3D before at all. I didn't even know how it worked. So to me, it was a success. I knew where my weaknesses was. So, after my first year of uni, I used the whole summer. So I did a 9 till 5 job, sort of working on something to sort of build my skill set. So, yeah, I mean, it's not great now. I look back at it because now I can see the success of how far I've come. But at the time, it was good for me because I'd not done anything, but I understood where the weaknesses from it were. So that gave me something to go look back at.
I love some of the things in the chat. I thought it was a whale. I thought it was a hippo head merged with a stingray.
So
I
let's
can
say
say that.
it's a hover car.
It's got shades of
Ash, you can say it's a hover car all you want. It's not a hover car.
It's part platypus. I don't care. That's a platypus tail, definitely.
It's literally got 2 fans in the bonnet to make it float, okay? And none at the back, so it should be going like...
What do you mean by literally? Explain this word.
It's quite obvious what it is.
That word you're confusing. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Kiara has a good point. Have you ever seen a car before, Ash?
I think this is the point of this slide, is that if you've been watching,
He's gone.
If you've been watching the Discord at all, we posted the other day that one of the games Ash was working on just before joining us here at Huddersfield was Pacer, and it's coming out in a couple of days. And he did a lot of the environmental tracks and stuff like that for that game.
That's got hover cars in it too.
And it's got hover cars in that as well. if you had asked this person that's did this penguin and the thing in the corner to work on pacer, you wouldn't. But over time, he learnt new skills. He developed, he iterated. He accepted that the hover car in the left wasn't a car and it was a failure.
It was a hover car.
But that is the point of what we're trying to get across here, is that you practice and you develop and you keep working at it, and eventually you meet your goal and you can do some interesting things. That growth is really important. Now, the next slide is a slightly different story, another example of growth. So I went through my archives, and this is the very first bit of 3D I did. Now, I was one of those people that thought, do you know what? I want to be a game developer. I'm going to make my own first-person shooter, all on my own. I can do it. I'm awesome. So I started to learn Dark Basic programming language, and started to learn 3D modeling. And this is as far as I got, which was a couple of polygonal spiders and a weird-looking hand gun thing. And I got it moving around, but this is again another story of you have to start somewhere.
But do you know what? If I have compared my work with that, I would have felt, what am I doing here, sort of thing, because that's already better than me. Now, I don't know who's better this day and age, but again, it ties in quite well with comparing against other people.
Yeah,
I think Clash just laid down a challenge there.
Who's
better these days? Yeah.
Do you know what? Actually, we have completely different skill sets now, so it wouldn't be a fair challenge. But it's quite interesting to see that you say that exact thing, is if a first year came in that had no experience of 3D, and I did these bits of 3D before I went to university. This was my first foray into it. I got a pirated version of Maya and started trying to learn it. So I went into first year of university having known a little bit, but there's lots of students there that didn't know anything. So would they have had that same thought of, I'm not as good as that person, how do I succeed? Or do they see it as motivation as their peers? I don't know. It's quite interesting subject matter, that in itself. How do other people perceive other students' work? We had a student last year that for his entire time here was known as the character guy, and why would you compete with him? I think everyone knows it's Kyle from that description, but it's you have to compare yourself to other people, but in a realistic way. I think that kind of boils down to how do you tackle that problem?
Either friendly competition or as a goal. I think when we started Hypersoft, is Sam and Lewis, they were sort of better than me, I would say. So they were sort of my competition. So I went away over the summer, did that sort of thing. And eventually we all ended up working together sort of anyway. But I used them as a goal, but saw the success from sort of comparing my work to my previous work.
We gained a new follower just because of Ash's terrible smushed platypus thing. Rad finally joined in and added an interesting comment about comparison turning into jealousy, and that demotivation and self-destructive side. I think that would cause. That was quite interesting.
That is actually really interesting, and it's kind of the thing that I think actually happened with Kyle and a lot of his peers, is that you see that work that someone else is producing, and you just, in your mind, you're like, why can't I do that? Why am I not? And you're constantly chasing them, constantly on their tail, going, I'm trying to be as good, but I'm not. And then that can turn into jealousy and sort of have this negative mindset that actually then makes you become demotivated to do anything yourself.
I think it's why you see a lot of the dark side of the internet when people post good work and people are having a go at that work. It's, I could do that if I had that camera, is what I see quite often. And it's that envy or that jealousy, isn't it? And it's just destructive for you and demotivational for both. So that's an interesting point that Rad raised. So
Yeah. I also see a lot of students that will see other people's work and they'll criticize it and say it's not very good, and they say I could do better. Well, the answer is then do better.
yeah,
Why haven't you done it yet? If you say you can do better, then do it.
yeah, absolutely.
You see a lot of I can do, not I have done. And we see this a lot in when we talk to students, actually. And you'll say, okay, well, they'll say, oh, I've been really struggling to get work done. And so you have a conversation, you have a one-on-one with them, and they'll use the phrase, I intend to do this soon, or I hope. No, actually, what's the one?
The hope.
I hope to do. Yeah, I hope to do this. And it's like, well, don't hope, just do it.
Rad says, show, don't tell.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. There's a good point from Chris. The thing is, nobody makes a game for a game jam and then gets hung up comparing it with the latest AAA game. It's a good example.
That is a really good example. Is that you would never compare something that you've worked on for a week or so to AAA. You compare it to a week's worth of work.
Yeah. So and then he finishes. Why get hung up in individual pieces? We should move on. We're nearly at an hour. So we're moving on to managing time. If we're happy with the failure, we've talked about it quite a lot.
Yeah.
Moving on to time management a little bit. Who wrote this one?
Yeah. So me again, and I think some of that failure on meeting assignment deadlines and stuff is because of managing time. So
I think time management is probably the worst thing that students have to overcome. It's not skill set, it's not software, it's not agility, it's just how I think if I go back through the years of teaching, I think the one thing that links every student, and they always say in reflection of their work, I wish I had more time, or if I had more time I would have done this. And it's like, well, you have the same time as everybody else, it's just how did you manage that time? How did you devote the tasks to the time that you had available? So there's some really good points on here from Ash, so I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, just basically it's worth taking the time to manage the time. So you know where to find the course handbooks, you know what modules you're doing. So look at how many hours are in those modules, but they use them as minimum hours. So obviously you need to put effort in outside of that time. So just sit down and plan some sort of time plan, but don't forget to give yourself buffers. So you're going to need to take days for your health. You're going to need to take breaks. You're probably going to overrun, or you're going to find a passion in something when you're researching. So you're probably going to end up, tweaking your time a bit. So for me, it'd be making sure you're managing your time correctly across these modules. Have those buffers in for if anything goes wrong. And make a to-do list as well. So break down that time management plan you've done into how are you going to tackle that time, or that chunk of time you've given yourself to meet your targets. And what I always like doing is just ticking them off. So it always feels nice when you do something and you tick it off a to-do list.
Just
if there's anything else.
Well, only briefly, one in the chat. They're still talking about the improvement, and Kiara saying about you get encouragement when you start, and then as you get better, that starts to turn. I was surprised to read Rad's comment about getting death threats for posting fantastic work. That's quite a surprise. I shouldn't be, I suppose, these days.
The internet is a horrible place, but also an amazing place at the same time.
Yeah, it's both the best and worst invention of recent time, I think.
Again, it probably comes down to that jealousy that
absolutely,
was as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just let him know he's muted.
Did we mute him? I'm in control. I can access it. Yeah. He isn't muted at my end. Oh. Must be muted at his end.
I can't hear him speaking. That's all.
That's fine. That's fine.
And I just say as well, with this managing time, part of it is just remembering that you're working on more than one module at once.
Yes.
So it's been a noticeable issue with quite a lot of the first year students that they seem to be kind of like working on one module at once, panic into a deadline, and then working on the next one, when really they should be working on 3 modules at the same time. I think so. You just need to work that better.
I think that is actually a really important skill to develop is actually how to work on multiple things at the same time. Now, it doesn't matter what industry you go into, where you go, eventually you have multiple tasks that you need to deliver for a client, for a boss, whatever it might be. And you can't just say, I'm going to do one thing and then the next and then the next. You have to balance your time so that they all get done for the deadlines that they have. So students do struggle with that when they join, being able to work on multiple things at once. Now, first years this year are only working on 3 things at once, and they're still struggling. Last year, they worked on 6 things at once. So it's that constant self-development, self-improvement of, okay, I know I need to improve this particular skill set, which is my time management. How do I manage tasks? How do I make sure that I'm constantly working to a goal?
I think having set time for each module as well helps, because if I'm working on a module and then the next day is I move on to the other module, I've had time off from that module to see it with fresh eyes, see what I need to sort of go back over and refresh on. And it just gives you a break from losing that motivation because you've spent so long doing one thing. So it's definitely important to be working on multiple things. And like you say, it's a skill, it's a life skill. You know, you're going to be doing this in your job from here on out. So managing your time, get on top of it now.
And actually, there's a comment in the chat which actually resonates with me, especially, is that sometimes you get bored with what you're working on. Yeah. So actually having multiple jobs, tasks going on at the same time means you can jump from them so you don't get bored. So Absolutely. As you start losing interest in one, you jump to the other. And as you lose back interest in that, you jump back again.
Yeah.
So that resonates with me a lot, because that does happen with me.
Me too. Absolutely. There's just a minor tangent. There was somebody asking about support. So I've put a link in the chat to disability support, which is relevant to that particular student. But don't forget, really, for all students, that we have an entire team, student guidance and support office in the school. I know we're remote at the moment, but they are accessible through Teams. And then there's a university-wide support system as well. So if you're in that similar situation of not knowing strategies to help with whatever it might be, then please take advantage of the support systems that are in place. There's lots of them. There's teams of people with myriad expertise. So that's there for you guys.
And that guidance team also have a back and track sort of system where they'll help you with time management, helping you make a timetable, things like that, so you can catch up on work if you're behind.
Yeah. Right. So I think the next slide is some tools that we've put in place, isn't it?
So this is just a couple of, because the reason why we put these on is that time management is unique to every individual. There's no one solution fits everybody. Some people, I know Daryl loves a Post-it note. No, not yet, Daryl. Whereas Duke loves a tool, so he used Notion for a lot to manage his time. So there are lots of different time management tools out there, and this is just 3 that we just threw up, of Notion, ClickUp, and Trello, that you might want to go and consider. So these are digital tools, but there's also physical tools such as calendars, notepads, Post-it notes, and there's lots of different time management techniques as well. Duke, you're one for the Pomodoro technique, aren't you?
I think, yeah. I mean, it doesn't quite work for me. I've tried it a few times, but it's very popular, and I know it works for a lot of people. And in fact, Gary's just said he loves Pomodoro. It's had a lot of success, and those bursts of working do work very well for some people. It didn't really work for me, but it depends. I think the most important thing is we can't tell you what works for you, but by experimenting with lots of different systems, all the way from Post-it notes through Notion, through Pomodoro and everything else, at some point one of those will click, and that's it. You kind of set then. Once you found the thing that works for you, your life will become easier, I predict.
Yeah, it's all trial and error. So for me, after sort of years working in the industry, for me, Trello is the best. Having them there that I can see and just taking them off when I've done stuff. But combining that with Toggle. Toggle's like an app. It will show you how long you've been spending on programs, or you can sort of set up little workspaces. So I can say, okay, I'm working on, couch animation today. I can start the timer. When I'm taking a break, it'll pause. And it sort of adds up all the little different bits you've been doing throughout the day. So it's getting a visual sort of graph of how you've been spending your time on that sort of Trello board I'm working through, but then broken down into all the apps I've used, just really helped me sort of understand my time management. So yeah, to me, Trello and Toggle is a good one I like.
Yeah, I think just experimentation is important with that one as well. Trying to find the right set of techniques and right set of tools that work for you. It kind of goes hand in hand with team working as well. Like the studio team, I know some of them are in the chat right now. We did a couple of different game jams when they came together as a team, just to try and work out how they were going to work together, what techniques, what tools they were going to use. And there was a couple of failures as we went through, as it didn't work and it wasn't successful, but they're slowly developing their own unique system that is getting better as time goes on. And that the same thing goes for time management, is that you won't find the right solution straight away. It takes a little bit of trial and error and practice, and you go, okay, let me try Notion, see if it works for me. And after a while, you're going, I like this aspect, but I don't like that. I wish there was something else that did this bit a bit better. And all of a sudden, you start developing your own system.
Cool. So we're at the end of the slides. Is there anything anybody wants to add before we start wrapping up? No,
So
that was easy.
time management.
Time management.
So just sort out your time management. I think there've been quite some interesting discussion points here, and especially I've really enjoyed reading the chat of people sharing their own experiences of especially failures and overcoming them, and then at the end the different techniques that they use for time management. I think it's a really good way to look at your progress as you develop as an artist, as a programmer, as a designer. Just reflect over and over again on how am I actually doing? What have I accomplished this week? And that's why time management comes in. If you have little tasks to tick off, you can see what you've accomplished in a week, and you can say, okay, well, actually I've accomplished a lot, or I've not done enough this week. I'll do some more the following week to get better. And as Kiara says, just don't get too depressed over some of the negative, the serious conversation topics that we've been talking about, because it is real life. You need to, everyone goes through ups and downs, and you overcome problems. But that is the point, is that you overcome those problems.
I think Rad summarizes very nicely at the end that as part of this time management, don't forget to manage in some sleep and potentially some playtime. We need downtime. Yeah, we can hear you, Matt. Daryl. You've got, as well as all those work times, you do need some downtime. So just block it in. Block in the downtime.
Can I just add that one of the things we've not really mentioned enough is what happens when you fall behind. Okay, let's assume worst case scenario, you have fallen behind. I've got a lot of students that basically are sticking their heads in the sand because they've fallen behind a little bit, and now we're embarrassed to show their work compared to everybody else because they're behind the curve. If you continue to do that, it compounds the problem. It gets worse and worse and worse, and it never, ever, ever gets better. It just festers. You have to deal with it. You have to just, to coin a phrase, man up a little bit and just show that work. I will, every single one of us will take it on its merits and help you improve and take you from where you are to where you want to be. But if we don't see that work, we can't do anything to help. And ultimately, that's our entire job.
One last point from me is Christian Chow just mentioned computational thinking. That's a really good point. Anyone in second year, go look at Lewis's lecture on computational thinking and managing time. He's done a great sort of lecture and breakdown of sort of how to do that stuff. So
cool.
Yeah, just a tangent from me, and that's it for me.
Awesome. I think we'll wrap up there then. So
thanks
thank you.
Yourself.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, really, that's smart. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. We'll see you all next week. Enjoy. What day is it today? Wednesday. Okay, nearly enjoy the weekend. We're not far off. Oh, is it Thursday? No, it's Wednesday. Let's run the outro. I'm like, what day is it? It's a day. It ends in Y.
Bye.
See you all.